Okay, so I want to talk about these two movies that I saw on Shudder. And I want to thank Shelly Druckrai, channel patron, for giving me access to her Shudder. Thank you, Shelly. And, oh, hello, by the way. Um, so, both of these I had a lot of thoughts about, and then in some ways I didn't know what to think about them. So, I, of course, as usual, with a lot of these that I kind of do like hot takes on, haven't memorized all of the technical information. So I have some cheat notes here, and I will lay some stuff on you because I want to make sure I'm correct here about a few things, and I'll put some info in the description. So the first one is Sadako versus KAYAKO. So let's talk about this. So before I get into the cheat notes with some facts that I'm not sure of, I'll tell you what I am sure of. It's done by Koji Shiraishi and made in 2016. He's a Japanese filmmaker. I've reviewed A Record of Sweet Murder by him on this channel a long time ago. I've talked about him a bit. He's kind of like, he's probably the most preeminent, is that the right word? Eminent, prominent purveyor of found footage horror working today. He doesn't get much credit. He's Japanese, and most people don't know who he is, and his stuff is not widely available, but he has a few titles on streaming kind of broken through, somewhat like Noroi the Curse, for instance, and Grotesque are two of the ones that really have gotten a lot of play on streaming channels. I've seen about 8 of his films, including this one I'm about to talk about, but he has quite a few. He has a series about urban legends. I think the format of them is found footage, but almost all the films of his I've seen have found footage as their conceit, as their gimmick, and Record of Sweet Murder was really strange because it was a found footage movie, but it was weird. But the weird thing about it was not just it wasn't one of his better movies, but it crossed over with another film of his. I think it was the film Cult, which was a wild found footage one. And they crossed over in the end. And the crossover was this character, who was obsessively filming everything that you were going to see on the screen. Your typical, we got to get the last shot, Alan, like Cannibal Holocaust. We got to get the film back. And that kind of thread of sensationalism trumping everything, even your own fucking life, that runs through a lot of films, even back to Network and, let's do the Death Hour. And Faye Dunaway's incredible in that. And, of course, Cannibal Holocaust. And a lot of found footage films, obviously Blair Witch Project. But even down to the film Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal, he's the same kind of guy. He's like a stringer for some news company or whatever, and he gets these stories, and after a while he starts kind of setting up parts of the stories and intervening, and it gets really fucked up, which that's a theme that was then obviously in Cannibal Holocaust. Cannibal Holocaust was like a parody of the Mondo films. Mondo films were real documentary films, but they would, after a while, they kept getting more and more exploitative as they went. It was Jacopetti, Guertero Jacopetti, I think his name, and Franco Prosperi. So those are landmark films. And I feel comfortable talking about this for a minute because there wouldn't be a Koji Shiraishi kind of cottage industry without Mondo. And Mondo was in the early 60s, Mondo Cane. Mondo Cane unexpectedly became a gigantic fucking export hit of an Italian movie. And the English dubbed version became very ubiquitous. It was very notorious. And it had the incredible music of Riz Ortolani, who's just an amazing composer. And the thing is, he did a theme called More, not to be confused with the Pink Floyd album from around that time. And, the Pink Floyd album was several years later, sorry. But More became nominated. It was nominated for an Oscar for best music, best theme song, or whatever. And I want to say it won, but I might be wrong, so I'm not going to swear to it. I had the album on vinyl for a while. It's a really great album, and I think I still have the Endo movies. They put out an amazing box set, Blue Underground. It was like $120. I bought it at Borders when I worked there, so I got a 30% discount. It was a DVD box set, had an incredible, beautiful cover, but the cover was not made to last. It was kind of like a see-through slip case, and it wasn't really glued together very well. But it contained these 6 like slimline DVD cases, and it had like all of the Jacob Petty Prosperi Mondo films, and then it had a new documentary, Godfathers of Mondo, I think it was called, by David Gregory, who at that time was doing interviews and stuff for Anchor Bay and early, beginnings of what became Blue Underground with Bill Lustig and Jay Douglas. And now, of course, David Gregory, he created Severin Films, and Severin Films is becoming very successful. They're really one of the most incredible, easily probably the top 2 or 3 most incredible boutique labels for cult films on Blu-ray. And I've reviewed several of their releases, and but David Gregory put that documentary about them together, and it's fascinating. They went their separate ways after several years, but they did Mondo Cane, Mondo Pazzo, which is Mondo Cane means it's dog's world. Mondo Pazzo is like crazy world, but it's also retitled Mondo Cane 2 in some markets to cash in. And a lot of people mispronounce it Mondo Cane. I did too for a long time, but until I saw the movie. But they did one called Women of the World, which is really cool. It's not as extreme and exploitative in a cruelty sense, but it is very whimsical, because they basically would go around the world and film events, customs, and tragedies, and accidents, and it went the whole range. From just there was always this whimsical, kind of patronizing narrator who was kind of making fun of the human condition and our folly. How ridiculous some of human customs are, and how repellent some human activity is. So those movies are the bedrock of a few subgenres, really. Obviously, there were a ton of other Mondo movies that came out that used the same formula. Eventually, this started evolving into what I call the real death films. Some people call them death films, but of course the seminal film like this is Faces of Death. Now, in some of the Mondo Cane films, there was a controversy. There are 2 controversies. One is that some of it was faked. From watching that documentary and doing my own research, I would say that almost virtually nothing in those early movies, which I named the first 3. There's also Africa Adios, aka Africa Blood and Guts. I don't think anything was faked in those movies. But here lies the other controversy, was that they set up certain situations to make sure they would get the shot. Like, for instance, assassinations of political prisoners in Africa. They wouldn't just happen upon it or hear about it and get in there and get the shot. They would be like, they probably paid somebody or sneaked in, and made sure they didn't shoot them until they were rolling, that kind of thing. And I thought the movie Nightcrawler really parodied that thing too, to where you start to become what you're filming. That this idea is also in Man Bites Dog, the early '90s French serial killer parody mockumentary, and another great film. And where they start, the cameramen and stuff start getting involved and becoming actual accomplices of serial killers, murders, the guy they're interviewing, Benoit. And so those were complaints against Prosperi and Jacob Petty and Prosperi. So the Mondo movies that followed, a lot of the stuff was fake. Then we get down to Faces of Death, and I think Faces of Death came out. When did Faces of Death came out? I bet half of you guys know way better than me. I'm kidding. I don't know. That seems to be a very popular cult movie to this day. 1978. American Mondo horror film. written and directed by John Allen Schwartz. So Faces of Death, I think I've watched it a few times over the years. I think the first time I watched it, I'm pretty sure the first time I watched it, I was at the home of Jeremy Horn, my longtime friend, and collaborator on music and roommate, etc. I'm pretty sure we watched it together. Not at my house. I think it was his house in, I don't know. His family lives kind of Indian Trail or one of these kind of adjacent little towns, little burgs. Then later I saw it, I rented it, and then much later I watched it on streaming. But it's like parts of it were very fake. And as they went on, they became more fake as the series went on. I have seen the first 3, and I've seen number 5. Number 5 played here in Charlotte, played nationally this way, but this was really a big deal back in the 1990s. Now this kind of stuff is extremely common. I attend some of these things where you have like these one-off, one-night only, national events, like Fathom Events puts on a lot of them, and then they're one of the more mainstream ones, and then a lot of them are funded by film societies. There's a group here that puts these on. They brought Suspiria here for one night only in like 2017. I went to see that. Just as examples, and they put together Fabio Frizzi scoring The Beyond live while it's playing. One night only, I saw that, though that was kind of like a concert, so that's why it was one night only. But Mandy played 3 showings in Charlotte, all the same night. I attended 2 of them in the same theater. So the House of Jack built played here like that. So, you have to kind of catch these special ones. There were a bunch that I missed that I wanted to see, like Revenge, the French film. It screened at this video store in this little uncomfortable room. I didn't see it, but it was described to me, and I'm like, who would want to see it on a TV in this little room with a handful of people in a video store? You could just watch it at home. So that's what I did. I bought the Blu-ray and I watched it at home. I eventually sold it because it didn't resonate with me for long, but I do like the rape revenge subgenre quite a bit. So give a shout out to my friend Shauna Wilson, who's a big horror fan, who we've talked a lot about this recently, and my friend Jesse Cooper, aka Jess Franco, who also is a big fan of this subgenre. You notice I've known a lot of women more than men who are fans of that subgenre. So one friend I used to have said, "Yeah, of course they like it because a guy's dick gets cut off," and I was like, well, I mean, so what? Maybe that is why they like it. I'm not intimidated. They're not going to cut my dick off. So, I'm not. So anyway, I saw Faces of Death 5 in one of these events. I went with my then girlfriend. I think I went with Jeremy Horn, I'm pretty sure, and one other guy. And a lot of it was fake. Most of it was fake. It was like really, really low budget. It was like a extreme knockoff. But it had like the goofy narrator. They created a character in the first movie, like Francis B. Gross, this fictional alleged doctor who's been around the world studying death. And so that became a gimmick for a lot of the real death films, having this kind of host. Kind of like you had the patronizing, urbane narrator in the Mondo films. So Cannibal Holocaust, which came out not long after his first Face of Death, was a parody of the Mondo films by an Italian filmmaker, Ruggero Deodato, and who I think passed away recently. He did. R.I.P. Ruggero Deodato. And scored by Rizal Orlani, the same guy who, I almost or did get an Oscar for the music for Madokai. And he did an incredibly beautiful theme for Cannibal Holocaust. It's really one of the most beautiful pieces of music that I've ever heard, really, very distinctive. And, I tell people a lot of times that in Europe, and in Asia, putting beautiful music to extremely harsh imagery is not ironic like it is in America. In America, it's like ironic, like when Tarantino and does it, and then a lot of people do it to be funny and be ironic. And I don't think it's ironic to them. I really don't. the interviews I've seen on camera of these composers and these filmmakers, I mean, it's really just, to them, it's all a continuum of human experience. So if you're showing something harsh, putting beautiful music, I mean, you could say it's glorifying violence, it's glamorizing violence, maybe, but maybe there's just a beauty to the art. You know, art expression, some of it is ugly, some of it's beautiful. When you juxtapose them, I think certain artists that comes naturally to. And it works. For me, it creates an incredible frisson, thrill in French. And but when it's done in America, to me it comes off as cheesy a lot of times, like mocking. Like it doesn't underscore the film; it undermines it. So anyway, but Cannibal Holocaust really was the touchstone. And of course, years later, a bunch of found footage films came out, and there was a recent Shudder exclusive called Found Footage Phenomenon. It was a documentary all about the history of found footage films, and I was very disappointed with it. I did learn some things, and of course, they covered some things that I was familiar with. They introduced me to some things I wasn't as familiar with, which is cool. But there's certain things they neglected, and there's certain things they, I think, spent too much time on. To me, they spent way too much time on the Blair Witch Project. And the only reason you would do that is because Blair Witch Project was such a giant, profitable hit, a phenomenon, like almost a cultural phenomenon. But as far as quality of the film and how memorable it is or be regarded as a classic, it hasn't held up for most people. There's still a lot of people who like it, you know, but they see it for what it is. They have it in context. So, like, okay, Blair Witch Project, that's kind of cool found footage film. But then there are people who slavishly worship it, and I think the people who made this documentary are among them. And then there are a lot of people who reflexively hate it. I'm one of the people who hates it because I utilize critical thinking. I don't disparage anyone who likes them. I have friends who like it a lot, but I have my reasons. There are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of reasons I don't like the movie, and I don't respect the filmmakers. I'm not as like militant about it as I was when I first saw it, you know. But you know, I would watch it again and try to see if my, you know, a different lens, you know, if I change my mind. But I think it's a poorly made, and I mean that's part of the conceit. I think it's lazy though, and it's lazy, but it isn't just lazy like, hey, here's some lazy, you know, film we made. We were having fun, or we wanted to, you know, tell this story, and we used the low budget as an advantage, and therefore we did it found footage style. And a lot of found footage movies, modern ones, are like that, and I get that. I mean, I thought about making a low budget horror film. I started mapping out about 20 years ago. It wasn't going to be a found footage film, but it was going to be kind of grainy and raw, but we never got to do it. I mean, we would have had to shoot it on video, and you have to be real careful how the look comes out on that, and I'm very particular about that because I love the film look. But video's come a long way technologically to where there's a lot of video, shot on video things that I do like the look of. 20 years ago, it was too raw and inartful to me personally. I mean, I had close friends who were making those kind of movies in that format, and I really just had to concentrate more on the story and the characters than the formal, you know, technical aspects, because they just weren't there and they weren't important to the filmmakers. So I had to kind of put, you know, them aside and contextualize what they were doing. And within that lens, some of their work was really good. But anyway, so yeah, Blair Witch Project, I think, is really like one of the most overrated films ever. I think the quality is poor, and I don't think it delivers. The quality is poor. Like I said, they use that as part of the conceit. So that would be okay in and of itself, because I understand that. But the way they hyped it on the internet, and this is pointed out in the found footage phenomenon documentary, that they were one of the first people who used the internet to maybe the first to promote a film to this degree, and it was like a stunt. Like they pretended it was real, just like Ruggero Deodato pretended Cannibal Holocaust was real, and he paid the actors to not work for a year, so everybody would think they were really killed in the movie. And then that he went to court, taken to court over all the violence, and there's real animal death. We know that that's real violence, unfortunately. But the actors had to show up, and they also had to show how they did some of the effects, like the woman impaled from in the mouth and out the anus, and she's hanging on the pole, naked, crucified. So he didn't go to prison. But, he was arrested for Cannibal Holocaust. That always trips me out. Pasolini was arrested for a few of his movies too. But I feel like Blair Witch Project took the phenomenon of the early internet and used it first to hoax people into thinking it might be real. So I get that. But they were relentlessly hype driven, and they were trying to make a lot of money, and I get it, that's fine. But they made way more money than they expected, and they never really did anything artistically after that of note. And to me, that's kind of crass, it's you need to contextualize. In other words, call it what it is. You can enjoy the film, but you can't go, well, this is great art made by people who are trying to say something or really make something that really looked good or crafted well or had something to say. It's none of that. It was just sheerly to do it, to explore that phenomenon of found footage, which was in its earlier stages then. And that's good. They helped break that wave and make it more prominent. And that to me is their importance. Their importance is the commercial success of the movie. That's what works against it for me, as far as I think the commercial success outweighs any artistic merit it has. But that is why it's important. But the top found footage phenomenon documentary made that so important that to me it started to engulf the whole documentary. I mean, at first they got kind of obsessive naturally and stuck on Cannibal Holocaust. Now, I didn't mind that because that's one of my favorite movies, and I've explained already what the importance of that movie is, more or less, in here. And if I haven't to your satisfaction, I've done 2 videos about it, so check them out, look them up. The more recent one is one of my more popular videos. And that's a popular movie. It's one of those movies that's just about mainstream, but will never be lauded in polite company. So it's always going to be transgressive. Blair Witch Project, it showed so little of anything truly disturbing that it could be subsumed by the mainstream, and there's nothing transgressive about it, and that's fine. But I'm just saying that Cannibal Holocaust has that edge, and I don't think it'll ever go away. There's certain extreme movies like that, Salo, 120 Days of Sodom, by Pier Paolo Pasolini, will always be considered just unnerving, intense, just Martyrs, which I did a huge long special on this channel, 2 hours. I didn't mean to go on that long, but I couldn't help it. So I subtitled it An Epic Length Examination. The rate this is going, I might be 2 hours on this. Probably not, but Martyrs will always have that power. A Serbian film will always have that power. There's certain ones. But anyway, yeah, so the found footage phenomenon kind of neglected the guy who was really working the angles the most successfully, artistically, and having some commercial success, and that was Koji Shiraishi. So in a roundabout way, it's taken me 20-some minutes to talk about Shiraishi, and the thing I'm going to talk about isn't even a found footage film. But I'll talk about his found footage film some other time. But they're fascinating, they're interconnected, they're clever, they're creative. Some of them are hurt by some of the production values and acting, but again, he makes those not perfect and imperfect and low rent, slack kind of qualities work because they're found footage films. So like I said, the Blair Witch Project did. This film was very well shot, well made. It had high production values. I don't know the story about how it came together, the production, but it's a crossover between these two prominent Japanese horror films that became like cultural phenomena, that became worldwide phenomena, that were remade and reinterpreted ad nauseum by American studios. And that's Ringu, aka The Ring. Before you die, you see the ring. I think it's still incredible phrase. Sometimes I'll just say it at work or something. Before you die, you see the ring. And the other movie is Ju-on: The Grudge, and the Ring remake called The Ring with Naomi Watts was pretty successful here in America. I want to say that Hideo Nakata, isn't his name, who directed. I think he directed the American one too. I didn't like it that much. The original Ring is really cool. I've seen most of the sequels and remakes, and the one I like the most, forgot the name of it, the subtitle, but I thought it's one of the earlier ones, and I think it was excellent. I think it was better than the original, but I can't remember what it was called. It was off the beaten path of the main sequels. It was an interpretation that I thought was very creative and interesting. I think this film, Sadako versus Kayako, is a great interpretation of The Ring, and it's an interpretation of The Grudge, which didn't compel me as much. I liked it, but I don't think I've seen Ju-on 2. Maybe I have. I'm not sure. But this is a crossover movie between these two. It's like Freddy versus Jason or King Kong versus Godzilla. It's two monsters that have reached a certain plateau of notoriety, of infamy, fame, whatever, enough to where they could carry a movie like this, definitely in Japan, and to hardcore horror fans all over the world. So a lot of people were really looking forward to this movie. Some people were disappointed by how little the two ghoulish entities actually spar. They spar kind of like for 5 minutes toward the end, maybe 10 at most. And there's a lot of build up, and some people didn't like it and thought it was too slow. And Shudder is filled with these opinionated people. It's getting like IMDb used to do, and they had the boards there where people could talk about the movies, and they finally closed them down. And I know a lot of people were glad because they thought they were just venomous and toxic and full of trolls. But I'll be honest, and this is part of my weird philosophy about things. I don't think they should have been shut down. I'm for total free speech. I'm a free speech absolutist. So with that comes a lot of trolls. With that may come people saying mean, nasty things that hurt your feelings. I've certainly been the recipient of quite a bit of that since I've been on the internet. I was a recipient of that before there was an internet in person, and that's what you take with the good with the bad. This is the risk you take to have free speech, is that speech that you don't like is also should be protected and allowed and tolerated, whatever. So anyway, Shudder. I mean, I'm glad these people have this little outlet to bitch and complain, but it's like after a while, it's kind of funny. The people who hate it kind of say the same things. They're all the sameness. That not many people have anything really new or interesting or clever or insightful to say about why they hate this. So I don't care about any of that. I read that stuff well after I finished the movie. Like an hour after I finished the movie. Because the end kind of puzzled me. The end was hated by a lot of people. So, yes, it's a setup, but the setup is great. Koji Shiraishi tells his own story. It's more heavily about the Ring and that mythology and that character Sadako and that conceit. So, real quick, for those who don't know, or for those who don't care, well, most of you don't care, you're not going to watch it anymore. The Ring is about a videotape. It's a cursed videotape. And one of the things they do in Sadako versus Kayako is they have a professor, and he has like the symposium about urban legends early in the movie. It's very similar to the setup in Candyman, the original Candyman, where you have Xander Berkeley as the husband of the main character, Helen Lyle, played by Virginia Madsen. And Xander Berkeley, he's kind of a sleaze. He's good at I don't know, he's a sleaze. He's really good at playing sleazy characters. but he's like dating one of his teenage students, or I don't know, maybe she's a college student, but his wife's trying to do a thesis. She's like postgraduate or whatever, and uh, but all this because everybody's seen Candyman. So anyway, the setup in this Koji Shiraishi film is that this professor, uh, he's talking about all the urban legends, and he talks about the Japanese prominent urban legends. Some of these are real urban legends, and then some of them are fictional urban legends. And what I didn't know when I saw the movie, but I found out researching Shiraishi, is he did a whole series of films about these kind of urban legends. And so this movie is like a meta crossover kind of film. It's kind of Farmerian, as we would call it in the Walt Newton and Philip Jose Farmer fandom of old and of current. But like I've told you in another video or two, I'm not really part of that anymore. I still am a fan, but I'm not really part of that community anymore. What's the word? I excommunicated myself because I felt like excommunication was coming. So I excused myself from that sphere after some painful experiences. So frustrating experiences. But that's all about like a lot of the conceit of Walt Newton is like that. There are real events that inspired these heroic tales of people like Tarzan and Doc Savage and Sherlock Holmes and Shadow and etc. And so they're real. So they explain how they're real, and you have the fictional biographies that explain it, and then the crossovers between all these characters extend the universe in which these events take place. And of course, my friend Winscott Eckert did two great books called Crossovers that explained and documented all this up to a point. And then my dear friend Sean Lee Levin, who's a sponsor and a patron of this channel also, he's written two more books that continued Wynn's work called Crossovers Expanded. And he's going to have a volume 3, I believe, coming out in the somewhat near future. So that's kind of cool. So this Shiraishi stuff is really interesting because not only did he have crossovers between some of his found footage films, starting to construct his own little universe, but he had this series of these urban legend films, and now those same urban legends are referenced in this scene with this professor who's lecturing. So they also take place within this same universe. Maybe not the same universe as the other found footage crossovers, but they all take place within that same universe, and also the same universe now we learn as the Ring movies and the Ju-on Grudge movies, or at least the events that inspired the Ring and Ju-on original films, because he changes the mythos a little bit, but a lot of people complained about that, but it didn't bother me at all, because like I said, I'd seen the one chapter of the Ring that was a little bit more postmodern, revisionist, and expanded the concepts that I thought was great. I wish I could remember the fucking name of the movie, but I liked it more than the mainline Ring, sequel after sequel. And as far as more recent wrinkles in the Ring, I saw the movie Rings with Vincent D'Onofrio, and it was, it's an American one. It's expanding that line of the American remakes, and I hated it so much. It's terrible. This film is much better. This is the film that kind of film wants to be. Because that film had nothing to say or nothing to expand on the mythos of this whole thing, but acted like it did and failed miserably. But this film, to me, succeeds well. And like I said, it's more slanted towards Sadako and the Ring mythology than the KAYAKO and the Grudge mythology. But they're both in it, and what he does is, so he has that character, and then one or two of our main characters are his students. And they're two girls, and this is a Japanese movie, so the Japanese schoolgirls are, probably going to pop up somewhere as protagonists or characters. Though there's nothing sexualized about that particular fetish, so don't worry if you're worried. But anyway, separately, there's a concurrent storyline that's intercut, and eventually they come together. And that story is about this other schoolgirl whose parents have moved into a new house, and a neighboring home has this urban legend. This urban legend about if you go into the house, you're going to die. You're going to see these spirits. It's really simple, but the Grudge mythology is pretty simple. The Ring is predicated on the cursed video thing, and this professor discusses both of these legends in the beginning. And of course, he's especially hung up on the Ring, and he said he'd like to see Sadako before he died. Like before he dies, he wants to see the Ring. He wants to see the supposedly you see her face, you die. So what's in the cursed video is just that. She comes out of a room. I mean, it's a little different than the video we saw in the Ring, but it's similar. It has this kind of drone-like music, this kind of dilapidated warehouse-like room, and out of the door comes this figure, and she's tall and has the long black hair that completely covers her face, and she kind of has awkward movements. She has a white dress on, and she shambles towards you, and then eventually, she comes up and you see her eye, and then boom, then it goes back to static. So now that you've seen that movie, then you get a phone call from her immediately after, and then you're going to die in 2 days in this movie. Other films have said 3 days. The one that I liked, I think, said 3 days, but a lot of the prevalent mythology, especially in the American version, said 7 days. So, of course, the fans on Shudder went crazy. Like, how dare you change 7 days to 2, goddammit. I mean, these people are freaking nuts, these fan bros. I mean, I've talked about them in my comic book movie reviews, but now they're like infesting the horror sites too. You can't, I know they always infest the Star Wars, community, but I'm not really part of that. But the fan bros, good lord. So calm down. So this guy is he has like a fetish for this whole thing, this professor. I mean, he's serious about it. I mean, he jokes about it in his presentation. He's like, I wrote a book about it. You should buy it. I mean, one thing I love about this movie, I mean, it's extremely well made and it looks great. And, to me, it's like I haven't seen the most recent Shiraishi movies, but to me, compared to all his other movies I've seen, this is really a breakthrough for him. It's more mainstream. It's more linear. It's not found footage, it's objective reality, though it deals with found footage really, because that's what the Ring Curse video is. It's found footage. And found footage horror specifically. So I like the fact it has a lot of humor. It has a lot of nudge, nudge, wink, wink, kind of making fun of itself all the times, making fun of the characters and how over the top they are, making fun of the phenomenon of it. The fetishization of these ideas and these kind of urban legends, and also the movies themselves. And it's really cool. And if you like The Ring, the Japanese ones, then I really think you absolutely have to watch this. And if you get hung up on all the changes, then it's not for you. But anyway, in this version, which again, this is, like I said, it's very meta. This is like the real story behind the Ring movies and the Ju-on movies and these other urban legends that he made movies about himself. So anyway, these two intertwining stories kind of go on. The one with the girl with the house, there's not much remarkable, but there is the scene where a little boy is dared to go in there, and these kids put rocks in his backpack to weight him down so he can't run, and he's got to stay in there a certain amount of time or they're going to beat his ass, and he just stays in there. And so they go in to find him, and he throws rocks at the main bully, and he hits him in the head, and he gets all bloodied. And basically, he's luring them in because he saw this little boy. That's the central figure you see in the Ju-on the Grudge. There's a little boy with these black oval eyes, and he's kind of dead, and he's blue, and he's got kind of a bowl cut black hair, and he's just this creepy boy. And then you see the other spirit. So I got confused when I started watching it because I had not watched The Grudge in so long. So I thought KAYAKO was the little boy, but apparently KAYAKO is the other spirit, which is a female. And the little boy is kind of like another spirit. So I don't remember how they died or how they got in that house or what all that mythology. I'm sorry. I let you guys down, you Grudge fans. I'm so sorry. And I never saw the remake with Sarah Michelle Gellar. I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it one day. when I'm on my deathbed or something. I don't know. I wouldn't be really good. I might hasten my demise. But so, yeah. So it's pretty funny. The spirits fuck up these boys, and then they get the boy, the nice boy. I mean, this is unsparing and cynical. And then this is an unsparing and cynical movie. I mean, it's not dark tonally or depressing, like, for instance, Shiraishi's Grotesque is. Um, but it really is irreverent towards everything within the movie itself. The movie itself is taking the piss, as the British say, at itself, and at the larger mythology and the fandom and phenomena around it, like I just said. So the Ring story develops pretty cool, though, because all these unlikely coincidences happen. But I believe that Shiraishi is winking at the audience because he's saying, yes, we know this strain of J-horror, Japanese horror, uses these coincidences, stacked upon each other. It's just almost to the point where it's absurd. And he pushes it to the point where it goes from absurd to comical, but it's right on the edge. It's still taken seriously within the movie and by the characters. But we watch it and go, come on, man. But then we can't really say that to Shiraishi because he's in on it. He knows it's ridiculous. So these two girls get curious, and the one girl, Yuri, the main character, she's really the main character in the whole movie. She wants to see the cursed video and find it. She wants to talk about it, write about it. She's really curious. She's really inspired by this professor and his passion. She's just really curious. And so in order to start finding out about stuff, she has to buy a VCR, and VCRs are no longer common. DVD players and DVDs are the common currency of watching video, and have been for the last several years. And that is addressed early in the movie, by the professor. He talks about that, and that's something that needs to be talked about, because it's obvious. It's like the elephant in the room. It's like, you watch a Ring movie, in 2020, when this movie was made, and you're like, why are they still watching this cursed VHS tape, man? So this, the professor, is like, if I find this, I'm going to burn it to DVD. And later on, well, they find it, but it's so unlikely and just incredulous that this would happen. They go to the store and they buy a used VCR, and it just happens to have the cursed videotape in it. Not just a videotape in it that might have something on it or whatever that somebody left inside it, just happened to leave inside it. And later we find out the girl who took it back from the person selling it to the store, she was a part-time clerk there, and she made the judgment call to buy it. And she knew the video was in it. And not only did she know the video was in it, but she watched it and then kept the video in it. Didn't eject it, just left it in there. So these girls go and watch this movie, and Yuri's friend is watching with her, and she's freaking out. And Yuri, meanwhile, is distracted by a phone call. So Yuri doesn't actually see the video. She hears whatever little bit of droney music is going on in it or whatever sound. It's kind of whooshing vacuum sound. And so her friend sees it. So her friend's now fogged. So then in the store where they bought this, that's when you meet the people who own the store, this couple, and you meet the part-time girl, and she talks about how she saw it. And she saw it 2 days earlier. And she even says it. She's telling him, she's like, it's about this time 2 days ago. She's already said, you're supposed to die in 2 days and get a phone call. And so, yeah. Right after that, she, for some reason, climbs to, the top high shelf of this bookcase of this library part of this used whatever place. It's kind of like Second and Charles when I worked there, except it has, 3 floors. It's kind of like Second and Charles meet the Strand, but not as big as either one. And it's in Japan. If you can imagine that. If you can't, then I won't worry about it. So she climbs to the topmost, and then she falls, and you're not really sure if she has an accident or she looks like she kills herself. And boom, she's dead. And it was 2 days later. So she saw the ring. Before she died, she saw the ring. So, I mean, fuck. So this couple is panicking, and then the girls come back and they're like, "Where'd you get this videotape?" And then they're like, "Well," and then they start talking about it. It turns out the husband knows more about it than he's told his wife, and she's like, "What?" Or maybe it's the other way around. But one of the couple knows more than the other. Like, "Why didn't you tell me this?" And because they didn't know the stuff that the girl told them until the girl told them, and then died. And then they see this, police tape behind them, and Yuri's like, "Did someone die here recently?" And they're like, "Yeah, the part-time girl." And then all of it comes out, the insane coincidence, and they're like, "Oh no," And now Yuri's friend's like, "Damn, I'm gonna die," and she's like kind of in a state of shock for the rest of the movie. And so Yuri tries to figure out what they're gonna do, and so they consult the professor, and he's like cool, he's like so happy. He like watches the tape, and he's like, "I don't care if I'm gonna die in 2 days. I'm gonna see Sadako. I'm gonna see the ring." And he's like, "I gotta dupe this on the DVD." And his hyperactivity is really infectious. These characters are very very well drawn. They're very whimsical and entertaining to me, and distinctive from each other. It's like they're different tropes you see in Japanese genre films, but just taken to almost a Lynchian level of absurdity, to where they're really funny, but not like ha ha laugh out loud. It's a very subtle kind of satire, and if you're in on the joke, like I said with Mr. Shiraishi, it's really fucking for me, it's really fucking clever and humorous. So um, he says, "Okay, so I gotta summon this woman. I forgot her name, and she's like a medium or a psychic or whatever. She has these powers. She's gonna exorcise this girl. She's like an exorcist. She's like an all-purpose, new age kind of sagely person, and she's got these assistants, and she's in these loud robes, and so she starts to do this ritual, and they put the videotape on the shrine. They don't play it. I mean, they just put the videotape there in this little shrine, and she does some, recitations, and Sadako comes to the fore and possesses Yuri's friend, and they draw her out, but they're not going to be able to banish Sadako. Instead, they brought Sadako to the fore, and she's able to through this girl, and just the force of her power coming through this girl, a girl's eyes turn white, of course, and opaque, and she impels or compels the two assistants to kill themselves very gruesomely. Like one kills the other by snapping their neck, and then that one snaps their own neck in a way that's totally anatomically impossible. But the kind of stuff you see a lot of Japanese horror movies. I mean, there's a lot of contortionism going on in these movies, and again, that's become almost a cliche kind of visual imagery in these films, and I love the way he exploits it. And the effects are good. They're real creative and they're cool. Are they realistic? I'd say they're surrealistic. Are they practical? Well, there was an argument on the Shutter board about that too. I like the practical ones. I hated the CGI. I really couldn't tell. I think most of it was CGI, but there was a little practical. But most of the ones in the Ring movies are CGI. I mean, no one's mouth can extend like that. You can do an animatronic character, and sure, but you have more control, obviously, when you're at a computer and you're like, manipulating it. So then the woman kind of freaks out, and the professor tries to help, and he's of course tripping out that Sadako has possessed this girl, but he's like, "I'm going to meet Sadako," and that's important to him. And so it's like an echo of those movies. Like, we've got to keep filming, Alan. We got to get the movie home. We got to get the shot no matter what, even if we die. And that's his mentality. He's like, "I've got to see the Ring video. I've seen it. I've got to see Sadako. I don't care if I die. This is like, I've got to do it." And so the woman that he got to do this exorcism after her assistants dispatched themselves, uh, she she kind of freaks out, and she like, controlled by Sadako, she like smacks him in the face, and his face, this is absurd. This might have been a practical effect. It like descends into this kind of insane, almost like a rictus smile, but insanely big. It's like a quick shot. Like she bonks him, and then his head is all fucked up, and then he dies. And you're like, wow, well, this guy was the character they were going to for help. What the fuck are they going to do now? And then the woman dies. And then the girl collapses, and Sadako's out of her, not to the fore anymore. You're like, what do we do now? Before the woman dies, she's like, we're going to have to call Rizzo. Is that his name? See, this is a kind of important thing I wanted to cheat on here. This character named Natsumi, by the way, is the name of the friend who's going to die. Keizo. Keizo. They call him Keizo. So Keizo is essentially this John Constantine-like character. Like this hard-bitten, cynical urban mage, who does these real weird little gesticulations and magic things happen. And like he does these whippy kind of things with his hands and then makes a sound like it's real perfectly timed. It's hilarious. It's nothing that hasn't been done before, but he's a very distinctive character and a very funny character. And he's very, conceited and cynical and overconfident. But he also, does kind of care sort of about these girls. He's real reluctant to do it, but the woman who died left him the money. He's dying. She's like, I left Rizzo the money under the altar. So they go to Rizzo, they pay him the money, which after they pay him the money, he's cool. He's got a sidekick named Tamayo. So Tamayo's this little girl. She's got round black glasses, and she's got this red outfit, like a raincoat kind of, or a little formal coat and a cap. And she's blind. She has a cane, but she can see things. She's got the second sight or whatever. And she always interrupts at these weird times to say, no, you're going to die. That's the wrong way. Oh, see that. And you're like, how does she know all this? And one person on the show said they need to make a movie about them and their adventures. I totally agree with that. Keizo and Tamayo need to have a spin-off of their exploits before this movie. Because Keizo doesn't make it out of the movie. So basically they set it up and he gets the brilliant idea almost an hour into the movie. That's the conceit of the movie. He's like, we're going to lure out both spirits. We're going to have them kill each other, destroy each other, break the curses. So they hook up with the girl who's been in the house now, next door. So now she's seen Kayako. So now she's going to die. Or Kayako's haunting her and going to kill her. She's not like on a timetable like the Natsuki character with having seen the videotape. And so Yuri's like, okay, I've got to watch the videotape. I got to be cursed too. And she does. Yuri's like all about self-sacrifice, and she's like, so she starts to be like, okay, I've got to save my friend. I don't care if I die. I'm going to shoulder all this burden myself. And at first the two girls go into the house and with the videotape and a VCR. So they're going to watch the videotape, cursed video, in the cursed house. And so Yuri watches it for the first time, so now she's cursed. So yeah, the two come out, and it seems like they destroy each other, but things go awry. Things really get fucked up, and the Natsumi dies. Does she die? Yeah, I think she dies. But Reizo's killed, and wow, the two beings have merged into this powerful being. So they kill Reizo. So Yuri goes into this well they prepared in the back of the house. Again, another kind of image that's used in some of the ring stuff. This well where Sadako, or in the American with Samara, crawls out of this well and their hair's down. And so they got the well ready, and Yuri's got to go in the well, and she's going to have the two spirits converge in her body, and they're going to destroy each other, and she's going to sacrifice herself. But instead, it gets out of control, kills Keizo. You're not sure if it kills her or just consumes her or totally possesses her. But that's when the ending gets dicey. So only Tamayo, the little blind girl, and the girl who was visiting the grudge house, they're the only two left alive. And they face this creature, and it's jumping around and, coming towards them with big eyes. Its body is fucked up because Kayako crawls like this, like on the ground, like a spider. She's like the reverse of the reverse backward spider walk, the infamous one from The Exorcist where Reagan goes backward and on all fours up the stairs. So she like, Kayako comes forward like this, and she's all pale, almost completely like almost albino, and she's got these red veins and bloody parts and these big eyes, of course, and this crazy hair. So these two creatures have merged. So in the end, they come out of that room where they're in. Sadako is in the videotape, and they're kind of like their movements are a combination, their appearance is a combination, and they come up to you and you see the eye, and that's it. And you're like, so what happened? You're like, they didn't die, they merged, so now they're more powerful than ever. They killed the two girls. Did they kill the two girls? Is it Yuri's body they're possessing that is all distorted with both their spirits in it? Are they coming toward the screen? We see the eye. Are we going to die now? So, anyway, the end was a little disappointing, but it was a fun movie. I was going to try to talk about a couple of movies when I started this, but I've gone on and bit your ear for an hour. Let me wrap this up. That was Sadako versus Kayako 2016 by Koji Shiraishi. That's my official review. I have spoken. So it's good to be back. I know you guys miss me. Yeah, right. I've been a little discouraged about the channel. I haven't been motivated to do anything, but I don't know. I'll talk about it in another video because I don't want this to run over. So, Blue Review is back for at least this episode, and that's my review. Rock on, my friends. Thank you so much for everything. It didn't work. It's funny when it does that.